Okay. All right, guys. This is session number 14 already. Uh, Anonymous market reviews with hiring managers for software engineering positions. And let me introduce our volunteer manager who decided to help us. And his name is Sergey Tsibel, Director of Engineering at SaatchiArt. And thank you, Sergey. Welcome to our mock interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, awesome. Quick disclaimer: uh, this is educational event. It's not a job opportunity, and Sergey he's representing only his own opinion, not the company's. So just to have clear understanding, right? For whoever just joined and who is the first time and not sure how it works, let me tell you briefly how it will be look like. So we will have two anonymous interviews candidates, and they should prepare just two questions. Tell me about yourself and what did you do at your last project. And then after that, Sergey will be asking follow-up questions, very similar in the real interview. And after that, the most important and most valuable will give a feedback. Feedback will be what went well, what candidate can improve, and basically this is it. You're all welcome to ask questions during the our session today. Just post in the chat. Um, yeah, if we will be able to answer them, we will try to answer them. All right, sounds good. And again, join to our Slack channel. Um, this is for your further references. We'll post the recording of today's session there on Monday, and we can do networking there as well. Sounds good? Okay, let me stop sharing. And we have candidate number one. Candidate number one.
Yeah, here's my resume. But so when I was born in Texas, raised mostly in Ohio, um, came out initially to study public health at Brigham Young University. Graduated in that, worked in healthcare for a few years, thinking I wanted to be a provider. And like a lot of people, you work in an area for a few years, you're like, oh, I don't actually want to go that route. So slowly, my role started becoming a little bit more technical, usually just kind of answering basic questions for coworkers, usually basic networking questions or Excel questions usually. Um, and I knew if I wanted to progress in this career path, I would have to come back to school. So I decided to come back. I figured my early 30s was better than my early 40s. Um, and so, yeah, and I'm a QA engineer intern right now. Um, so I have this semester, I have the summer. For all intents and purposes, I'll be done over the summer, but I do have one class to take in the fall, but that'll be online. So that's basically the summer is the end of that. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about myself. And as far as my last project, I'm going to change that direction a little bit and just say my current projects, because 5.5 months ago, my wife and I had our first, and that takes up a fair amount of time. And so, um, last projects are probably a little bit out of date. Um, and so, but currently, right now, I am working with me and a few other friends. We're building basically a website for a local baseball team, a local high school baseball team. The front end, we're doing that mostly, and obviously HTML, CSS. We're using Bootstrap because, um, well, truth is, none of us really want to take a lot of time to write a bunch of CSS. Um, so that's what we're using on that. And we built out the structure of it in our first, I'll call it sprint, the first iteration. Well, not iteration, I guess, but I'll just say the first sprint of it. And then now we just had our school's just finishing its spring break. So this week we're gonna be building out more of the back end, and we're gonna be using PHP. We're using the XAMPP tool. And so we use PHP and MySQL. And so that's what we're mostly going to use for that. And then currently I'm working on as a QA engineer intern. And with that, we do a lot of automation, which is basically software engineering with a little bit more of a QA focus or QA hat during that time. And so we're working on building tools, mostly in C# to help automate a lot of the manual tests that we have to do. And I did just talk with the head of our they call it portfolio, but I think it's not a department, but it's a section. And he was thinking about, I mean, in the future, they're going to try and move this to AWS. And they've had some problems because they're a large organization with a lot of their .NET tests and framework. And so they've been toying with the idea that eventually they'll move it. The team that I'm on particularly lags behind a little bit because it's a very high profile website. And so they basically stick with what works for as long as they can. And so that's a little bit about me and my current projects and what I'm working on.
And what are you looking for?
Yeah, I'm looking to be a software engineer. And so because it's a great starting point for a career in tech.
Got it. And so you're doing a little bit of QA and a little bit of software engineering. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, I would say that's probably correct. I think I view it a little bit differently. It's mostly automation work. So I feel like that's an automation engineer is just a software engineer who's got a little bit more of a QA focus right
Fair.
now.
So okay. And so what kind of engineer do you want to be? Front end, back end, full stack?
More back end. I like, obviously, I mean, you can see on my resume there's C# there. I work mostly with that. I mean, they teach, the president of our university used to work for Microsoft. So it's a pretty Microsoft heavy place. And so I like C#. That's what I focused on. I've tutored in it. And I've obviously dabbled a little bit in Python because, I mean, Python's pretty ubiquitous now. I think I was looking at the TIOBE index yesterday. It's right up there with Java in terms with that Java, excuse me. And so, yeah, I would say mostly backend is what I'm mostly interested in.
Awesome, cool. And so what are you doing right now? Are you trying to get a junior interview position somewhere, like a position as a junior engineer, or are you more looking for opportunities to explore like an internship, or what specifically you're thinking of?
Yeah, I'm definitely more specific towards junior engineer just because I'm near the end of school. And so like I mean, that's more of a practical standpoint. So it's like I can work full time. I mean, the internship that I'm doing right now is full time. And so I really feel like this has been a great learning experience, just being on the QA side, because it allows you to see different aspects of the software development life cycle. That, I mean, developing software in school is very different than developing software in the real life. And so I'm at the point where I'd say junior engineer. Got
it. Awesome. Cool. So backend junior engineer is what you're targeting.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so we can structure interview around that then, and then just go through some of the basic principles and questions just about engineering, and then we can dive a little bit deeper. But before we do that, can you give me an example of the hardest thing you've done so far that is a backend engineer, as a backend engineer, just like any technology that you worked with, either on a side project yourself or for somebody while being an intern? And if it's a part automation framework in QA as well, because it's also a backend code. You can also describe that as well as an example of some of the projects. If it's not most complex, you can say what's the most interesting or was most exciting thing you've done for yourself.
Okay. Perfect. So I would say the most complex is probably what I'm actually learning a little bit more about their automation framework, because this is a large organization, and like some large probably like a lot of organizations, a lot of their stuff is homegrown tech. You know, they don't fall into like just saying, hey, we're going to do, use one of the common automation frameworks. So it's a lot of it's just diving into the code and figuring it out, like what they're trying to do. That's not the hardest part, actually. The hardest part, though, is probably getting everything set up so it can run. For whatever reason, there's not as good of documentation as I like in the QA engineer space, and so a lot of times I'll spend a lot of the day looking at Google and Stack Overflow for, okay, what's this error message mean? Because some of the error messages that, well, anything gives, but Visual Studio gives, isn't quite as helpful. And so the initial setup is probably right now the toughest thing I've ever worked on. And that will probably change, because if you asked me that 2 years ago, I probably would have said the initial setup for what I was doing then was pretty tough. Yeah, so I would say the initial setup to get their tests running, because there's about 30 tests written, and as far as I know, only 2 of them are actually running. And so diving in and just trying to figure out, I mean, there's comments in the code, but besides that, there's no other documentation. So a lot of it's just diving in and, seeing what works and what doesn't work, and spending time on the forums and the internet, just trying to figure out what the error messages mean.
Okay. Well, maybe we can dive in. Do you want to tell me, to the best of your ability, describe me the whole local setup and how you did it, and what were the most challenging things about it? Yeah,
of course, I'd be happy to. Sorry if I didn't answer your question the first time. But so ideally they are using Visual Studio. So ideally you just clone the repo and the tests go. But they recently did a consolidation, which has thrown a lot of it off. Basically, they've changed, and this isn't like secret information. Like, so if you type into, the end user won't see anything, but if you type "Come Unto Christ," which is kind of the website for a lot of their stuff, they changed that to be moved into the directory from churchofjesuschrist.org/Come Unto Christ. So you'll see a change in the URL. So that's thrown off some of the tests. Another thing that's thrown off some of the tests was, well, one, just the lack of documentation. And you probably know this much better than I do, but Chrome, they auto-update their versions and stuff. And so a lot of the problems are just figuring out which version of Chrome you need, and then what version of the Selenium WebDriver, or I think it's called Selenium WebDriver. Or maybe, but the driver that you need has to match up with the version of Chrome that you have. So depending on when the test is developed, that works or doesn't work. So those I'd say, are the 2 main problems that I'm having right now. And
right, so you were describing your problems. Let's start with just like very basics. So I got a new laptop. I'm a new employee in your company, and I would like to set it up. What will be my first steps to do to actually prepare my local environment to start working with that framework?
Yeah, I would say first, your first step would be to install Visual Studio, and make sure it's not Visual Studio Code. Obviously, those are 2. One's an IDE and one's a text editor. So install Visual Studio. It's pretty self-explanatory once you're in there, but once you have, assuming that you have access to the repo, or you obviously need to request it if you don't have access, then you can just clone that repo, and then all the tests will be in your Solution Explorer there on the side.
Do I need to install any programming languages or prerequisites on the local machine environment itself? Do I need to have any libraries or packages installed, downloaded from internet?
Are you using a Mac or a Windows machine?
I'm using Mac.
Okay, so you'll make sure to install Visual Studio for Mac, which is still pretty similar. You won't have to install anything on the local machine, but you will have to go into what's called the NuGet Package Manager, and you'll have to get the right web drivers and then the right what do you call it? Not the NuGet Package Manager, but the right spec flow. I forget the full name of it, but it's the spec flow package. Those are the two packages that you're going to need. And again, you can do those in Visual Studio in the NuGet Package Manager. And if you're confused on that, because it's hard for when we're not doing that, there's plenty of tutorials to see the NuGet Package Manager. So you could probably just Google it and a video would pop up. But I think it's under Project, or one of the ways you can access it is under the Project tab.
Got it. And so where's the repo hosted itself?
Well, they are actually changing it, which is another causing some other errors too. So it was hosted on Bitbucket, and they're switching everything over to being hosted on GitHub as of, I want to say 2 weeks ago. So that's where the repo is hosted.
And what do you think about it? Do you think it's a good decision or a bad decision?
I don't really have an opinion. I mean, I use GitHub personally, so I'm more comfortable with it. But I think what we'll see if it's good or bad, essentially, is how comfortable people are using the tool, because Bitbucket's a little bit more, it has a nicer front end, nicer UI that you're going to be dealing with. So dealing with merges and pull requests and all that fun stuff. It's a little bit more UI centric, whereas GitHub is a little bit more, well, ideally it's usually more in the command line and it's not quite as intuitive. But I don't think it's a huge deal, because they both are essentially doing the same thing, hosting code. But I think that's what I could see them having problems with that, for especially like my immediate supervisor, who's not necessarily a software engineer herself. So
if you start your own project, which one would you pick and why?
My own project, I would always want to use an open source language. So I'd probably lean towards C# or Python, just because Python's super accessible. I'd probably lean towards actually a little bit more on Python now that I think about it. Even though I feel more comfortable with C#, a Python environment is, in my experience, has been easier to work with. And so if I want to,
you mentioned the programming language, but I was asking the repository. Would you go with?
Okay. I'm sorry. I would probably use GitHub because that's what I'm most familiar with. I don't have any problems or anything with Bitbucket, but it's just a different UI, and so I think there'd be a learning curve there that I don't necessarily want to deal with. Just like with any new technology, you'd have to learn it, and I wouldn't be nervous about that, but I'd probably stick with GitHub.
Cool. And then you mentioned that you would go with Python. Let's chat a little bit about that. So how comfortable you are with the Python itself?
To answer your question, the short answer is I'm kind of comfortable with it. I'd had a class last semester that was in Python. It was in the healthcare stuff. And so basically we're just using Jupyter notebooks to write Python code. And so I'd say I'm kind of comfortable with it. I'm comfortable enough with programming in general that I don't feel like I couldn't pick it up. But I feel like it's easier to get the setup going, to connect to his repo on GitHub, and then downloading Anaconda and setting it up with Visual Studio Code it took, I don't know, I didn't time it, but it took like 15 minutes or something. And so that environment is just, for most people, I feel like it's easier to understand. And so if it's going to be a long-term project that somebody else is going to look at, I would try to do something that's a little bit more intuitive.
Does Python have package manager?
Yeah, it does.
What's the name of it?
It's called pip. That's what it's called, pip. And so,
what do you like? What do you like about it? What do you think about it? What's your opinion
on pip?
Mhm.
As long as you have it installed, it's really not, at least in my experience, it hasn't been terribly difficult to use.
How
I
do you
think that,
install it?
go ahead, sorry.
How do you install it?
It's been a long time since I've done that. So the short answer is I don't know, but I remember doing it from the command line.
Mhm.
So,
Okay, yeah. Pip comes with Python, so you don't need to install it.
okay, okay.
Yeah. And what about just basic difference between pip and nugget? Do you think there is anything?
Obviously one's for C# and one's for Python. NuGet is, Visual Studio is a very, I'll say nice, but it's also very complex IDE. So you use it, it's easier for somebody just to use it once they're in Visual Studio. Pip, again, you use most of the examples I've seen, you use it with the command line or the terminal in the Mac. And so it's as long as you're comfortable with that, then I think you're fine with it. There's not, as far as what they do, there's not really a whole lot of difference. But as far as what you're interacting with, there is some difference.
Got it. Okay. Cool. And what kind of projects have you done with Python? Have you tried to use Selenium with Python?
I have not, no. And that's one of the things that I've actually been wanting to try recently, is because obviously I'm involved in testing, and so Selenium is a big name in that. But I know Python was easier to set up, so I wonder if it'll be easier to set up a testing environment for as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about testing actually, and tests.
Yeah, that's fine.
Since the backend engineer would actually, in my opinion, should write as many tests as the automation engineer.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, everybody should be writing unit tests to at least test their code initially. So,
So what kind of tests do you know? Do you want to just name a few? What are the
yeah.
tests? Yeah.
So the 4 basic tests, are you saying like what kind of tests have I written? Or when you say what kind of test do I know, what are you specifically?
Let's start with what you know, and then we'll transition it. What have you written?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I kind of, in my mind, I break it up into 4 things. And I got this from guru99.com. Anyway, I just want to make sure. So it's not like these are original thoughts in my head right now. But the 4 tests I kind of think of are is the unit test is the basic foundation. Then you deal with integration testing, and then service testing, and then user acceptance testing, sometimes referred to as UAT. Unit test, do you want me to go further in depth or no?
Yes, please.
Okay. So unit testing is basically when let's just say you're creating a website or something, and you've got some JavaScript or PHP logic. Unit test basically tests a piece of logic to make sure it's functioning correctly. It doesn't have to be those languages. Obviously, it can be any language you can, and you can write a test for it. And so testing, you're not going to use it a whole lot with HTML and CSS because there's no logic in there to test anything with. I mean, you can look at the website and see if it looks how you want it to. And so, but mostly you're going to use the unit test for testing code with logic in it. Sometimes the unit, that's like the smallest piece of code that you can break it down into, is going to be a method. Sometimes it's not. It's kind of personal preference on that side.
If it's not method, what else can it be? If it's not,
it could be a simple if statement. That's like a part of a method. Does that make sense?
No.
Why not? I was just thinking, because like I've written methods where there's, an if statement, or if it's going to be a long if statement, a switch case or whatever. And so, but it's not the whole method. The method is, whatever else it's going to include. And so you can simply test that statement.
So another software engineer wrote a function. Inside of that function, there are 3 if statements.
Okay.
How can you test one specific if statement in isolation? Without, because usually the way we do unit tests, we provide an input to the function and we expect certain output, right?
Yeah.
So in this
That's-
case, you're saying we're gonna change that. We're not gonna go and test the function itself. We're gonna test one if statement. How would we do it?
That's one, that's a good question. Two, I mean, you could just I don't know why you couldn't just see the output of the code, like you're using a debugger or something, and you could see what the output is at that point. So why couldn't you write an if statement or why couldn't you test that if statement if you can use the debugger with it? I guess that's what I'm thinking. Obviously, you know more than I do, and I'm just trying to understand your perspective.
Absolutely, yeah. It's more of a how we describe it and approach it, but the lowest element of the unit test would probably be a function.
Okay.
You could test, usually with unit tests, we're trying to encapsulate the smallest possible chunk of business logic. An if statement would be just one variation of a function input and output combination, if that if statement changes and breaks it. But that's still testing a function. You wouldn't be able to test one specific if statement in isolation. Now, what you were describing with debugger, absolutely. You can just take a breaking point and just get and do it, but it has nothing to do with unit test. You were testing stuff manually. But if we were about to write a unit test that is going to be run independently without you, where you don't have like any interruptions, where you don't have any sniffers like Xdebugger or any other tools, we're always testing the purpose of the unit test is input output kind of a story. Fashion. And then and what about integration tests?
Integration test. So first off, ideally, I mean, you have mostly all unit tests, if not all unit tests, automated. So those just run when you push the code to the branch that it needs to be on. Integration tests, we do most of those manually. The ones that I've participated in are mostly like, I would say end-to-end testing, even though it's not fully end-to-end, it can be sometimes. I mean, it's got aspects of it is what I'm trying to say. If I want to see if a certain component on this web page works with other components. And so that's integration, that's the definition of it, anyway, sorry, I don't want to, I tend to overcomplicate things sometimes, but
it's all good. Yeah.
So
quick recommendation: just don't focus on like formal textbook definitions.
Okay.
Your goal is to articulate and simplify the knowledge you have in your head to me in the shortest way possible. So just try to explain it to me the simplest way you understand it and you think about it, and then right away reinforce with a very specific example that you've done.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say integration test, I've mostly used that on the website. And so how I think of it is as they add we recently added a component to that website called Uber Tile. It's a tile on a website that you can run video on, you can do a bunch of stuff on. Obviously, I didn't develop that, so I don't know it specifically. But when we brought that Uber tile in, we wanted to see how it would interact with the other components on the web page, whether it's the header, the body text, whatever it was. And so that's how I understand integration testing is you want to see how one component of a website acts with other components.
So let's write this test in our head.
Okay.
Walk me through it. How exactly you're going to write this integration test?
Okay. This integration test I would write by first.
What is the test? Just like, here's what a test does, and here's exactly how I would write it. Just like in 3 sentences kind of thing.
Okay. So this test is going to be testing the Uber tile, or sorry, the component and how it interacts with the other components. And so I would first write this test by putting the component that I want to test in there, and then I would loop through every other element that I want to test with it. Does that make sense or no?
No.
Okay. So
So
I
you're
have,
about to write a function. Integration test is going to be a function that you're going
okay.
to put in your automation framework. Walk me through the input, invocation, and output and the test of
Okay.
the function that you're about to write.
Yeah, so the input of the function would be the,
Give me the name of the function first. How about that?
okay, I'm just going to call it ubertile because I keep wanting to say ubertile.
No, the name of the function has to be it has to indicate what are you testing, and a very specific aspect of it, because we are writing a test, and that if you write test as a function, it needs to have a very specific test. This test tests A, for example, integration test that user can be created. Okay, and the way integration test works is I'm going to hit an API endpoint to create a user. Here's an input. It's going to be a JSON, and I don't know what's going to happen behind the scenes because it's going to be a black box testing with integration, where it's going to go somewhere. It's going to go to this website or this web service, this URL, and then I know that there's a bunch of software going to be executed there. I'm not testing anything about that software and how it works. All I'm testing is I'm waiting for a response back from the server. And the response should be a status code of 201 or wherever our expectation is to indicate that user, in fact, was successfully created. Maybe it's a redirect, it doesn't really matter. I'm just looking for that indication. And so my test function, my function integration, I have an integration test suite. So I have a bunch of them. And one of the integration tests is a test that user can be created. Input JSON, action is invocation of HTTP request, and output is wherever the response I'm getting and analyzing that response is valid. And this is it. The test is completed. If the response is different, the test fails. If the response is the one that I'm expecting, the test passes.
Okay.
Okay. So let's try to do similar exercise here with, maybe you don't have to come up with the test. Maybe you can just give me an example of one if you guys had one in the framework that you were working on at the church organization.
Yeah, so to answer one of your questions, so I don't know of one that they have in that organization, or at least I haven't used one, an automated one. That's why that's why I do it manually, I should say. And so then based off what you said, I would just create a function. I'm just going to call it component test, for lack of a better phrase. And then obviously the input is the JSON, so we'll probably store that in a dictionary, and then we can test that component that we want to test, basically, and we just loop through all the components that we want to test it against. Does that answer your question or no?
A little bit too vague. You kind of describing me generics where I'm like, hey, Nathan, let's jump in. Tomorrow, we're going to start working together. Let's write one test together. Let's sit down and write it. And I really want to just kind of visualize it. What is going to be the test that you're writing? And I can't visualize it. But that's okay. Let's move on.
No, it's okay. I don't want to misconceive you. Like, I've been a QA engineer for 2 months, and so I probably don't have the exact knowledge that you're looking for.
No worries at all. That's why we're doing it. Okay, so let me ask you this question. You said in your company you have 30 tests, right?
Yes.
Framework. Only 2 of them are working. Is that correct?
Yes, that is, as far as my knowledge goes, that is correct.
Do you know why is that the case? Why is 28 tests are failing?
I think part of it is a skill. And by the way, this is just my opinion. It's may or may not be fact.
Absolutely.
I don't want to throw my coworkers under the bus, but I think it's 2 things. It's a communication gap. Like, working remotely has some definite advantages, but it's a skill like most other skills, and you can develop it or not develop it over time. And so I think there's a little bit of a communication gap there. And 2, I think the biggest reason is there's a skills gap. it's me as an intern and then 2 other QA engineers. And I personally don't feel at this point, well, they've never walked me through any kind of test and stuff.
Have
So
you-
what,
To walk you through that,
I'm sorry, what?
I was in a very similar situation like you
Yeah.
before. Yeah, and on the first day when I actually joined like this. I asked them to walk me through every single thing that exists there, regardless if I understand it or not. And then they walk me through every single thing, and I would have a very specific answer. The reason they don't work is because we broke them 6 months ago because code changed, or the reason they don't work because the framework got updated, or the reason they don't work because browser is not the current version on Selenium. Like, well, I'm just curious. Here's my biggest red flag.
Okay.
I would expect in 2 months that you would know very specifically the answer to these things, just from your curiosity, regardless why it's working, why it's not working. I'm just the curiosity needed to be there, and I'm just trying to understand why didn't you discover it for yourself. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night without knowing why only 2 out of 30 tests are not working. Not because I want to take responsibility for it. I'm just curious. Why is it that they're not working? And if there's nobody in a team can answer me that, I would at least take the code. 30 tests is not that much code. So you can
it's not.
try to sniff through it, to look at it. Seems like you understand what Python is and how the package management work. You're already familiar, and you can apply the same principles on C#. So you kind of you already have an idea how to not to get lost completely by just looking at the code. And I'm just very curious, why didn't you find it out for yourself?
That's a good question. That's something I probably should have done. Well, not probably. I should have done better. And then I would say I was more focused on understanding more of the big picture of the QA realm, to help me kind of fit things in a perspective, because I was being asked to do stuff and I'm like, why am I doing this? Kind of a situation, And so
That's
I was
question to ask. We'll try to ask ourselves that.
And so I would say that's why I did it. It's not an excuse. It was an oversight by me. I should have dug more in depth on that.
Got it. Okay. Because that's where, one thing, people make mistakes, and that's totally cool, and that's happening all the time. I make mistakes all the time. I take websites down whenever there's a problem in a code, even though we try to automate and test everything. We do to the best of our ability, but then there is a motivational component where some things are not necessarily mistakes, but I'm just rather I can't quite understand why this wouldn't happen earlier, So that's just an example for you to take a note of.
Okay.
Cool. Eugen, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up. I think we did pretty well.
Awesome.
Let's go with the feedback. So what, Sergey, do you think? What went well?
Thank you so much for your time, for participating in it. Yeah.
Thank you, candidate one.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you can turn off the camera. And just a reminder, this is anonymous. It's supposed to be anonymous mock interview. We're gonna post the video. I will do editing, obviously, but that's okay. So, Sergey, what do you think about candidate number one? What went well? What did he do good?
He showed some initiative. That's very good. So in general, I'm just probably going to repeat myself twice. Am I doing it with another candidate, right? After this?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll just say it. I'll try to say it once for the first and probably the future candidate. In general, here's how engineering managers think during the interview process. The most important thing, I need to understand if the candidate possesses the knowledge or not. And knowledge does not equal to experience. So there are 2 ways to determine if you know it or not, or you understand it or not. A, if you are an experienced engineer, who are senior, who have few years in the background, who've done some projects, who work in the big organizations, who just have experience. And so the way you analyze that engineer, you look at his experience and you discuss his experience. Okay. Unfortunately, junior guys, and this is the biggest disadvantage that you guys have, is you don't have that. What you do have is ideas, because any knowledge that we as senior leads, wherever it is, any knowledge that we gain today is going to be useless 3 years from now, 5 years from now. The technologies changes nonstop. What remains there is ideas and principles, and that you guys definitely should have. With ideas and principles, nobody expects you to know everything and anything, but just based on what you decided to learn yourself and wherever you decided to put on your resume, we're going to talk about that. So the first rule, number one, don't put anything on resume that you're not sure of. It's going to hurt you more than as you benefits. If you're going to start adding keywords, for example, this candidate have only 2 skills listed. This is actually like on a opposite of overdoing it. This is like less than ideal. He should be listing more. Selenium, he mentioned that, he worked with that, definitely go in. Experience with automation framework, definitely go in. Experience testing by hand and vice versa, definitely needs to go in. The second candidate resume that I already had a sneak preview of, I think overdid it, because
let's wait for the second candidate. Let's talk about the first one.
Yeah.
So okay, let's move smoothly to what he should improve then. Like,
so number one, the only way he would get a job anywhere is by producing excellent communication. And communication, we have limited time. We only have 30 to 40 minutes. And in that time, he needs to be very detailed and specific answers, very specific. There was too much water in the answers where there was unnecessary backstories and so and so. It would just need to be a question, answer. And if I needed to elaborate on something, or ask details, only then he would jump in and explain me more. So that was a lot of time was wasted on unnecessary stuff. That's number one. Number two, there was one good stuff where he said, I don't know. It's very important to say you don't know when you don't know something, rather than trying to find an answer, because I'll catch it anyways, and any engineering managers will catch it anyways if you like don't really know, but you said you did. That's a good thing. But on the other side, there were examples where he kind of said he does know, but then we started drilling through it and he couldn't explain himself. So the biggest thing he needs to try to improve is communication. Like, don't try to answer textbook answers. Just try and be like how you understand it. Just try to communicate that to me. I just need to see how you think. I know you don't know much because you're still early in your career. But if you can communicate well to me, we're going to be able to work together well.
Nice. Okay, and I would add something else here. So I'm a little bit confused because the candidate number one, he said that he's pursuing the career as being a backend engineer, but his resume here, it stands out as a QA engineer and nothing that really specific to backend engineer. So my advice, and not my advice, it's just confusing, right? And this resume looks more, and as I saw that interview went to testing. So this resume just about QA, right? And you need to be more specific if you're searching a job in backend engineer. So you need to customize your resume, and obviously to emphasize whatever you've done as a software engineer, as a backend software engineer, and vice versa to QA, right? Don't bring vague resume that you're trying to cover everything.
Also, just try to Google how to put resume together. There are a few things that definitely would need to be improved there, like skills, keywords, and stuff like that. There are a lot of unnecessary stuff here and a lot of stuff that is missing from this resume.
Yep. Awesome, Sergey. Thank you very much. It was really great feedback. Thank you, candidate number one. Being the first one is always the most challenging. You're doing a great job anyway. I think you're just in the beginning. So please apply whatever you got the feedback here and you will improve your interviewing skills, and you will get your software engineering position job.
Actually, I'll say that too. I don't know if it sounded too negative. I actually think there is something there. There is a good opportunity there. Just don't lose motivation. Don't stop. Keep learning that, and I think it will be great. Yeah. You will definitely get there.
Totally. All right, thank you very much, candidate number one. Ira, do we have candidate number two ready? So before we moving with the candidate number two, whoever is just joined recently and curious how you can participate in being a candidate, so go to Meetup, and most of you probably came here from the Meetup page. So in the Meetup page is described there the steps how to participate as a candidate here. So the first of all, you need to apply to fill out the form. The second one, you need to go to our Slack channel and to join the nearest onboarding session which Irina is hosting. She's doing the every other Saturday. So I believe the next maybe the next onboarding session will be the next Saturday. Connect with Irina and communicate with her. Anyway, let's move forward. Who can share this? Yeah, Ira, could you please post our Slack channel in the chat? And candidate number two, are you ready to share your screen?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am.
Hi there.
Give me a second, please. All right. So you see now my resume?
It's coming, I think. I don't see it yet. I see the black screen.
Same here.
Black screen. Okay. Give me a second. I figure out it.
Just stop sharing and try it again.
Okay.
Black screen again.
Sorry for that. Give me a second. I don't know what's happening. All right. Yeah, on this.
You may choose the specific screen you want to share.
Yes, I know that. All right, now it's fine.
Perfect, cool. All right, candidate number two, please, you have 4 minutes. Please tell us about yourself, about your last project.
Okay, hi. So I'm candidate 2. I'm a front-end developer, currently based in some city. And I moved here from some country in 2019, and I'm very happy with this decision. I got my first job as a front-end developer in 2015, and from that time I keep working on and learning in this field. I was lucky to work in companies from different business domains, such as e-commerce, retail, marketing, what else? It's sound and media production, so on. And different size and structure. Some were small, friendly startup, other were global corporations. This experience gave me much flexibility. I always try to see the picture in full. It helps me a lot to make balanced decisions and estimates. From the moment of relocation, I switched to paternity leave. So, well, now my kid is on daycare, and I'm fully focused on returning back to work. So I get this is main information about me.
Awesome, awesome, cool. And so what are you looking for? What kind of position?
I'm looking position front-end developer, but you know, I grew up to be a middle engineer in my previous country, but now I understand that how to say it's from that moment of so I understand that modern technologies, market requirements and trends are changing extremely fast. And I understand that losing the real work practice for a year or two throw me far back in the line of candidates for job. So now I'm fully focused on the recovery of my existing skills and learning the new ones. And I guess it's junior front-end developer.
I see. So you were middle, then you took a year off, and then you think that you fell back to junior because you lost the sense of technology?
Yes, right, correct.
But the skills that you have listed, I feel like all of this is still very much relative. Like
yeah, but you know, I'm not expert at all, and a lot of it needs to be remembered diving into the documentation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about well, some of the most complex projects that you've done in your career.
Yeah, sure. So on my last job, I worked on two products in parallel. Both followed agile methodology. As a part of core R&D department, I implemented and supported company's internal application used for employees' performance evaluation in CIS countries locations. This application was built on .NET platform, backend written in C#, front-end part was in Angular with TypeScript. I used material design for graphic interface implementation and also customized the Telerik UI GView components to style it according to company's design. Well, another project in this company was a mobile application development. The application provided users with access to their genetic data. After blood screening test they made and showed some follow-up recommendations from doctor and so on. My team was fully responsible for implementation of this application for Android platform. We used native script and Android SDK. On both these projects, I was responsible for UI development, its style and dynamics. I was working closely with designers and our product manager. So,
And so you work both as an Android engineer and C# engineer?
No. C#. Okay, the comma. My team was has different how it's called. Okay, for my field was only front end part, so I worked with UI part and
so material UI for the smart application, right?
Yes, right. It's like using only native script and customize some blocks, make its dynamics. Yeah, I never. I tried to touch in little C#, but no, it's it's hard for me.
Got it. And then for the Android, you did the Android code itself, or did you do just like CSS? What did you exactly do for them?
Yeah, I create some markup for Android and a little bit, yeah, it's styling, but it's different. It's my first experience. It was my first experience do something for Android, and yeah, it's just a markup and styling for Android. That's all.
Embed for on Android application, they were running the browser wrapped into that.
Yes, right.
Cool. Yeah. Just one quick note right away. Like, it would be good to list specifically that you did that. Like, it says that you worked on it, but it doesn't say like what exactly you used in terms of tech there on the resume. So I was kind of confused a little bit of what you were referring to. So, and you worked there for a year.
What was it?
And you worked there for a year.
Yes, right.
And so what you were the most proud of in those years? What did you accomplish?
It's a good question. You know, it's all my previous experience in company 3. It was all technologies I tried to first time. So I never use no one before in my previous companies. So for example, it's like Angular, TypeScript, I never used before. And I don't know. I thought that I would be growing with this technology because my member team was a full stack developer, and these guys sharing all knowledges for me.
So got it. So what are you the most proud of? That you learned more?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Okay. What about just what you've written? What were the most exciting projects you've launched there in 1 year, if there was one?
I think this the last one, the company 3, because we completely done with this smart application, and it was cool job, you know.
Can you describe me the tech stack and how did the engineering process look like?
Yeah, so the first step, we are gathering by agile methodology. So we have a planning and separate some tasks between a person and a team. And
how big was the engineering team? How many engineers were working specifically aside with you?
It's one QA engineer, 2 full stack developer, 1 front-end developer, and 2 designers.
I see. Okay. And so it was just 1 more front-end developer aside from you?
Yes, right.
Did you guys do PRs against each other or not?
I don't know really.
Pull requests. Did you guys use GitHub or Git at all? Any version control system?
GitHub, yeah, we use always GitHub, but we have and we separate. So we always use GitHub, and we always have recovery copy on some hard drive.
Got it. Do you want to describe me the branching model on GitHub? What was the process look like?
Yeah, sure. So we use the master branch for deploying, and you create some branch for your task. For example, you need to create some logic with collapsing, whatever. And when you complete your task, you create merge request, or no, not merge request. You create
Pull requests. Yep.
pull request, right? So another member of team just check it. If it's everything is fine, it's creating merge request to master branch. If we have some conflicts, we resolve it, and after that, it's merging to the master branch.
Got it. And you are writing what? CSS, JavaScript?
Yes, right. CSS. So in the first one, I write in HTML, CSS, and a little bit TypeScript.
On the first one. And what about second one?
Second one, it was native script, and it's a little bit different because it's development for Android.
Okay. And wait, so you said that this is kind of the most complex thing you've done, right?
Yes, right.
What was the complexity? What was the complex part for you about it? What did you? Is it just sheer amount of code, or is it there was one specific like task that you guys brainstormed for a long time before you accomplished it?
It's hard to answer to these questions. Because I feeling like I work in the best team ever, because I never feeling like I not I don't know. It's hard to explain.
It's okay. So you described me the workflow of the teamwork. Walk me through whenever it merges to master. Do you have a general idea what happens to your code? So like as a front-end engineers, we need to be able to understand all the steps of the pipeline, not to build the pipeline ourselves, deployment pipeline, but at least to understand what exactly is going to happen to our code before it's going to get delivered to the browser. Do you know anything about it? Do you know what was happening behind the scenes?
I think so, yes, but maybe I answered is not correct, but I think it's we're talking about CI/CD, right?
That is one example of that, yes. But I'm just specifically more curious about like if there's caching, concatenation happening, chunking. Walk me through the process. Like what is the difference between the code that I see in the browser and the code you committed?
Sorry, no, I can explain it.
Okay, so mystery. Got it. Do you know some of the caching rules in general, like just best practices on like caching, CCC, caching concatenation, and what was this third C? Don't remember what's the third one.
No.
No. So for example, when we write CSS, we write it like a separate CSS file, but then you want to minify it because you just want to.
Right. Yeah. I understand. Yeah, I understand what you're talking about.
Okay. Have you guys done any of that there?
Yeah. For example, we use Webpack.
Okay, there we go.
And we create some custom configuration to minimize CSS, to uglify JavaScript, for example, yeah, and compress image, picture, and that's all create some file with small of size, It's like when you create some build, for example.
Totally. In fact, it does do build. Why do we need Webpack?
Why do you need Webpack? So
In
Yeah.
your opinion, don't overthink it. Just like walk me how you think about it.
I like Webpack because when you write a code and just running, it's immediately showing in the browser what you do. And if you have some errors, Webpack show you if including some packages in packages on, for example, Babel.
But you can, yeah, exactly. You can use just other tools to analyze the quality of the code before you even use Webpack. So like syntaxes analysis, you can do way before you commit it.
Yep, right.
Okay. Have you looked at Webpack yourself? Have you tried to do any customization or settings on it?
Yes, I do.
Oh yeah. Okay, walk me through it. Walk me through some of the things that you do like about Webpack and what you don't like about Webpack from your personal experience.
Okay, the hardest for me it was create some configuration for working with for direction for all files. You know, when you run in Webpack, Webpack creates some structure for you. For example, one of this folder including only images, another one is only styles files, another one is files for JavaScript, and so on. So I think this is one of the hardest configuration for me, but I figure out. I read documentation, I saw some video, read another resources, and yeah, I figure out how it's worked. But another all of this, it's very simple. I mean, about Webpack and configuration.
Okay. Tell me about chunking. Have you done much about it? Have you looked at it? Why do we have chunking, and what are the chunking strategies that can be used?
Yeah, I'm used. Okay, give me a second. I need to remember it.
Yeah, take your time. While you're thinking, I'll tell you right away. Like Webpack is a crucial foundational piece for a front-end engineer these days, and I would definitely like you have it as a keyword on your technical experience, which is great. But I would definitely describe the work you've done with it, especially that they were giving you ability to write your own config file for Webpack. This is not a very common experience among front-end engineers. Usually it's pre-written by someone else more experienced. If you already had that experience, I would definitely like highlighted it in general, and I would not consider you as a junior engineer if you can describe and justify how to do settings on the Webpack. So definitely keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. So okay.
You know, it's all good.
No, okay. So my decision. So concept of chunking is all other bundles like Browsify, Requires, or Almonds coming back to the of, for example, our Webpack application. Yeah, we have I don't know.
Can
no,
I I'll give it a try to explain it, and then you see if you agree with me or not. If I would explain a Webpack in one sentence and the purpose of the chunking, I would just say there's a lot of JavaScript that our application have, and split it. Why we need to split it? Because A, we want to serve it in parallel. Concurrency serving is going to speed up the page, and B, we don't want to serve all of it right away. So we want to serve minimal one. And so chunks let you do that because you literally split your code into logical bits, and then you just serve those. That is absolute minimum requirement to serve the page.
Yes, right.
In general, as you can tell, like this is not a book answer. I didn't like think of any definitions, but that's how I feel about it. So I just, don't overcomplicate things. You're trying to like overthink it. Just answer simpler in the future. Okay.
Yeah. It's, it's like I said that I need to dive into refresh my knowledge because last time when I used Webpack was 1.5 years ago.
Okay. While we still have a little bit of time, let me ask you, let's dive into like some basics, just so we understand where we are.
Okay.
I have a website, a.com. On the website, a.com, I have a JavaScript function that makes a XHR and fetch call. Do you know what is XHR request and fetch request?
No.
You don't? Okay. But you do have, let me see. You have Ajax listed. What is Ajax?
It's Ajax. It's short anonymous or short asynchronous JavaScript, and it's like
Can you explain it like I'm 5 years old? What is Ajax?
Okay. With Ajax, web application can send and retrieve data from a server asynchronously, without interfacing, without the display and behavior of the existing page.
That definition kind of like, I'm not 100% sure I know you understand it. If I were explaining it, I would just say, I need to make calls from web page to the server. And this is the only way to do it. Because every other way, I need to make calls to the server with refreshing the page itself.
Okay. So Ajax is a set of web development techniques using many web technologies on the client side to create asynchronous web application. So with Ajax, web application can send and retrieve data from a server asynchronously without interfering with the display and behavior of the existing page.
Yeah, but you're reading textbook answer. I'm more like trying to see the understanding. But XHR request is an example of HTTP request that is made from client to the server. And Ajax is one of the implementation of that with jQuery, which is the old way. In fact, we don't use Ajax. It's all outdated.
Yeah. So, okay. For example, create a simple HTML HTTP request and retrieve data from example, a TXT file. Create an HTML XML HTTP request with a callback function and retrieve data from a TXT file. Request head information, request XML file, for example.
Okay, not sure. Okay? Let's move on a little bit here, just to save everyone's time. So I have a website, a.com. You own that website, and then you need to make a request from website a.com to the website b.com. Based on the textbook definition that you gave, it seems like you can just write such a function and make a call to the server b.com from the browser. Would I be able to do that?
not ready to answer this question.
What do you feel like? What's your like gut feeling tells you? Like, walk me through the thinking process. Like, you as an engineer, you've done it 1 million times where you needed to write functions to make requests from the browser to the server. There's no right and wrong answer. I'm just curious for the thinking process, how you think about it.
No, I don't know.
Okay, but the way I would answer it is you cannot make a request from A.com to B.com. You can only make requests to your own server, unless there's like a asterisk there, because this is where the questions are jumping into more of a HTTP protocol, just in general understanding how internet works and how the protocol is working and what you can do and cannot do with HTTP protocol itself. But what's going to be a limiting factor is CORS headers. And CORS is the part of the protocol that says, well, it's not super secure to make a request from server A to server B, from the website powered by server A to server B, because what if somebody is executing malicious JavaScript and trying to steal your cookie or wherever else? So they prevented it by default. Now you can explicitly add certain URLs if you're owning A.com, and then you say, you know what, guys, I actually trust B.com, and I'm going to add a specific header that allows that to happen. Then you can actually go ahead and do those requests. Do that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely take a note that just like HTTP is a very, very like 99% of the time you'll get asked questions about HTTP protocol. Front-end engineer, back-end engineer, or QA engineer, it's just something like ABC. You need to know it very, very well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it's fundamentals, and like it doesn't really matter how good you are at React, Redux, or Angular or jQuery. If you cannot understand fundamentals strong, you will always fall back into writing not excellent code, to say the least, in those frameworks. You have to start somewhere foundational. Cool. So let's move on. Evgeny, how are we doing on time? You're checking the time, right?
Yes, we have 5 more minutes.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see. Well, we can go 2 ways, and the candidate can tell me which way he prefers. I can just ask more questions on some of the keywords that you have on the resume, or we can talk more about your past experience, and we will just evaluate how well you can communicate and explain how the technology you worked with before works. Which one is less stressful for you?
The second one.
The second one? Yeah, let's talk about your previous experience. So, am I understanding correctly that every single keyword you listed on the experiences, you worked with that before, right?
Yes, right.
Awesome.
Not all in companies. You know, with some of this experience, we have just like own understanding how it's worked.
Awesome, even better. I really like when people actually study something on their own where it's not required by their business or company. Let's talk about Redux. That's an exciting topic. Tell me, why do you think we have Redux? So let's say you're about to start your own website, or you join the team and the boss doesn't know anything about technology, and he's like, okay, can you please like build this website for me? Why would we want to ever include Redux in it? Why we think about it? Like, what is the benefit of it?
So for managing application state, I think.
Can you give me an example of Redux usages that you had in previous career or on your side projects? Basically, how did you use it?
I used it only once when I create my own application, when I get some courses, and you know, truly it's very hard to understand it for me.
I see. So this is, I'll tell it right away, we're gonna talk about it in less than 4 minutes. This is, if you use something once and you didn't really understand it well enough, you need to cross it out. So don't never include those technologies in it, because every single keyword here, you need to be able to, how do I say it so you can remember it, like a fight a war for it, you know, like you need to justify it, like I know exactly what it is and how it works. Okay. Cool. So pick any of the keywords from this list that you are comfortable justifying, that your experience is good there and knowledge is solid.
Okay.
Okay, I'll pick it for you. REST API. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Cool. What is it?
So okay.
How about this? Have you used it before at work?
Yeah. So I just trying to remember in my previous job where and how I used for. Okay, that what I remember, it's used to access and manipulate data using a common set of stateless operations.
Feels very textbook answer. Give me like real human answer. Like, how do you understand it? So like, give me a very specific example how you used it.
Okay, let me.
You see, you are giving me complex, very like complex, well-defined textbook answer, and then you cannot support it with very specific example right away, which now like makes me think like if you just reading the book somewhere and I'm just like, oh yeah, I wrote out every single keyword and then I put dash and then I copy paste the definition of it. It's like, you know, it's not gonna help you much. You can do that technique while we're all remote, and maybe on even remote interview in general. But A, we always turn on the camera on so people see if your eyes moving, and B, it doesn't really mean anything. Like memorizing those answers doesn't help anything.
Mm-hmm.
So any examples of that?
No.
We'll stop.
I think Sergey, yeah, let's move with the feedback.
Awesome.
Let's move with the feedback. Thank you, candidate number 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Sergey, what do you think? What went well?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of to unpack here, and this is very like to be like honest, so that you don't stress out. I see it all the time. This is very common, and this is some of the things I'm going to talk about slow down the most of the people. Well, first of all, the biggest red flag is there's at least 4 times when I was giving a textbook answer, which was like, did you just read it? Did you just Google it? Or did you just copy it somewhere next to your resume? You have a printed definition of it. It never helps anyone. Like, in fact, it only hurts because like, okay, this is weird. People don't answer like this. Give me examples. And then suddenly breaks altogether. And this is usually where the interview is over, actually. There's not even going to be a continuation of the conversation altogether. On the other hand, the positive things, like some of the technologies, he actually knew, like experiencing with his Webpack is great. Like that he understood it and he was able to configure it. This is definitely a way out of junior league. And in general, I'm still have questions a little bit. The resume that I see, now we know that half of the keywords needs to be crossed out from this list. But initially when I looked at it, I was like, this is actually 4 years of experience and the keywords are very relative. This is like React, Redux. This is all up-to-date hot stuff. And I thought that maybe the candidate should go for a mid position. But then the more we discuss it, obviously a lot of keywords needs to be dropped, and he just needs to be more honest with himself and the people who are going to interview him, what he actually knows. It saves everyone time.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And from my perspective, it really sounds that candidate number two wasn't really prepared for this interview. And I think this is the biggest, my concern, I would say, because you need to defend each and everything to what you put in your resume, even if you have a gap. Going to the interview is, you need to get prepared, refresh, not on the interview, but refresh before the interview your experience, your knowledge, and
I would also add one more thing that was a huge red flag for me is, as you noticed, I rarely ask for like specific knowledge that you need to memorize. I'm looking for a thinking process just to understand how you think. And when I ask you, just tell me how you think about request from A to B, like you just didn't have any answer. This is very rare and unusual. Just telling me how, maybe it's just stress and then you were uncomfortable in general. But in general, you should just be able to talk how you think it works, because if you had experience with it, you definitely know it.
Yep, totally. And another thing, but it's like more personal. It depends on the person. But I would say you need to, for candidate number two, he needs to have stress management better, because if I understand that it's a stressful process anyway, and especially we do this in front of audience and people can see his answers and how he's doing. In the real interview, maybe the level of stress will be, I don't know, it can be less, but it can be higher. But what I would say for candidate number two, try to avoid, um, I mean, just be calm, just be calm.
Hint, when I was facing it myself like 10 years ago, I also were very stressed in the interviews. In fact, I was even stressed when I'm interviewing people. It's in general, it is a stressful process. Evgeny, you're absolutely right, 100%. And one way to overcome it is practice. Just actually, like, not this kind of like not real interview, mock interview, but also like go and try to do the real interviews as much as possible.
Yep. And then when the whiteboarding comes, it's gonna be even more fun.
Yeah. We
Anyway,
doing whiteboarding. We almost never do it these days. We substituted it for a homework, and then again with homework, we can tell if the candidate wrote it or not. So.
actually, Sergey, let's talk about it maybe after the feedback.
Yeah.
How the interview process going. Anyway, candidate number two, thank you very much. Just apply. If you apply just 10% what Sergey said, you will definitely increase your interviewing skills. And interview is just a skill, passing the interview. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Sergey, can you walk us through the interview process? How usually in pandemic it's happening? Because with other companies, for example, instead of whiteboarding, yes, we shared the screen and did coding challenges, or like what was. There are some services where you can write the board, like Miro, where you can write and your thought processes. But
yeah.
How about you guys?
So we actually, let's just split two things, junior roles and senior roles. For junior roles, we don't want to torture candidates. They're already stressed enough. We know that they don't have much knowledge in the first place. So what we're looking for, as I said before, just like thinking process, that they can think critically and they're teachable. They are willing to learn, they're eager to learn, and we need to see that motivation. For example, we had candidates where she asked us what stack we are using in our company. She like right away asked that, okay? And 2 days later, she learned it and she sent us example. Nobody asked her, she just followed up with emails and sent us examples saying, hey guys, I played with it, I learned the technology, here's some examples I wrote, do you think it's right? of course, we called her back like, oh my God, you just learned everything on your own. And then we just had a conversation about it. So this is an example where a person just was so motivated and stoked to do it, and they did it. So juniors, we don't do whiteboarding. So usually pre-screening, it's a phone conversation with hiring manager or somebody from the senior engineering team. And it's basically just to understand that candidate, the culture fit is there. Culture fit is the wrong word. Just the critical thinking is there. And the person is motivated and interested. And then you have a full day of interviews over the Zoom. It's 1 hour each. You meet front-end team, back-end team, in our case, product management team, that is a huge one, and then somebody from talent acquisition. And this is where the hard questions happens. For junior people, again, just thinking process evaluation. For senior people, after that full day of interviews, we always, the last session is we ask them, can you give us 15 minutes to 20 minutes of live coding where we sit down together, and senior engineer can code a lot in 15 minutes. And usually 15 minutes, surprisingly, is more than enough to understand if the person got it or not. To be honest, it's really in the first 3 minutes, you know it. And I'll share like real secret. Usually, when you interview somebody, like even with these 2 candidates that I was interviewing today, I could already tell in the first 10 minutes where it's going. It's usually very clear there.
Yep. Agree. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for participating for today's session.
Does anyone have any questions? I don't know if there's anyone posted something.
Actually, yeah, we have a couple questions, but most of them I already answered. But
what if you have working knowledge of language? Should you list the language in your resume? Should you list training used to update skills? If you have the knowledge, always list it. One thing I would add too, please don't list stuff like Photoshop. It's actually hurting you more to list. Imagine if I would put on my resume that I can hold a spoon and I can eat with the spoon. Like it's irrelevant for the job, and B, when I see that people start scratching for these keywords, what else can I add to my spreadsheet? Like, can I add like Excel? Can I add like Google Docs? Like, no, it's all unnecessary. Just put what's relevant and always adjust your resume for the specific company you're applying to. Always adjust it and only what's relevant. I don't want to read 50 keywords. 10, 20 keywords is maximum, and only those that you actually know and they're relevant to the job.
Yep. How do we know if a technology well enough to list it on our resume? Is it enough to have experience implementing in one project?
No, you can always list it, and then if the interviewer asks you about it, so let's say you listed MySQL database, I would just ask you, if you're a junior, I would ask you, well, tell me what you think it is. So at least you know what it is. That's a good starting point. Second question, well, have you used it? It would be great if you answer yes and just give me an example how you used it. And you can be very honest and direct. Well, I just created a side project and here's what I did with it. And this is my extent of it. And then I would ask you, did you try to do this or that? And then we would take it from there.
Yep.
Awesome, guys. I would need to jump off because I actually have to run.
All right. Thank you very much, Sergey. It was awesome. Thank you for your participation. And guys, I will post.
I really hope somebody learned anything from it. Really hope.
It is. I will post the recording on the YouTube video, so please follow us. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.